Um, my name is Matt Sturdivant, and I'm on the leadership team for National Ministers Council. And I am here with Val Andrews, who is our tech host, and we are your hosts this evening. And without a long introduction around the circle, it's kind of nice to see who is in the room and who is around. And so if I call on each of you, could you just maybe share a name and where you are currently, and that'll kind of help us know who we're here with. Rebecca, let's start with you.
Great. Thanks, Matt. And thanks, Valerie, for hosting us this evening. My name is Rebecca Driscoll, and I am in Attleboro, Massachusetts, serving the First Baptist Church of Attleboro as their pastor.
Okay. Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, Jim on computer number 2.
This is Jim Cummings. I'm the pastor of a tiny church in a tiny town of Union, Nebraska, and I'm also mostly a chaplain with Catholic Health Initiatives, hospice, and 2 hospitals here in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Ed. Oh, you're muted, Ed.
I do that all the time. Sorry about that. Ed Bernard, associate pastor and chaplain, healthcare chaplain out of Boston.
Okay. Welcome. Corey.
Corey Fields, Calvary Baptist Church, Newark, Delaware.
Welcome, welcome. And Wong.
Yeah, Wong Valui, pastor at Santa Clara First Baptist Church in the Bay Area, California.
Welcome. And Julio.
Hello, Julio Gonzalez, pastor of First Spanish Baptist Church in Central Islip, and secretary of the leadership team of the Ministers' Council.
Good to have you tonight, Julio. Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie McHenry. I am a minister at Bethany Baptist Church in Cleveland, Ohio.
Welcome, Stephanie. And Bruce has just come on. Welcome, Bruce. Tell us where you're from and maybe your ministry context. Oh, Bruce may not be in the room. Oh, there's Bruce.
Good evening. Apologize for that. I'm Bruce Carroll, Apcott region. I'm from Shreveport, Louisiana, pastor Antioch Baptist Church here in the city. Glad to be here.
Well, welcome. Glad you are here this evening. Glad each of you are here this evening. You have joined us maybe just because you want to hang out with folks on a Thursday evening. Maybe there's something that is connective for you for our topic. Tonight's topic is Make Me to Know Your Ways, Gathering in a Season of Election Anxiety and Unsettling. One of the things that we as a national team talked about is just kind of being aware that that this is kind of an anxious time for some folks. We don't presume it is for everybody, but for a lot of folks and a lot of churches, there's some anxiety present as they watch the news or they listen to debates or they go to the coffee shop and hear arguments and hear disagreements and discussions. And so with that, we want to talk about what does this look like for us as pastors, as chaplains, as clergy. And so the language for the title obviously comes, well, not obviously, but perhaps you would know, comes from Psalm 25. And so I'd like to begin with Psalm 25. Perhaps you do know that it is one of the alphabetic acrostic poems, and each word being a different Hebrew letter. And so for those of you who are Hebrew experts, you can imagine the Aleph and Bets and Gimels going by as we go down the line. So here now, this is from the NRSV, not the Hebrew, the NRSV, Psalm 25. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. O my God, in you I trust. Do not let me be put to shame. Do not let my enemies exult over me. Do not let those who wait for you be put to shame. Let them be ashamed who are wantonly treacherous. Make me to know your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all day long. Be mindful of your mercy, O Lord, and of your steadfast love, for they have been from of old. Do not remember the sins of my youth or my transgressions. According to your steadfast love, remember me for your goodness' sake, O Lord. Good and upright is the Lord, therefore he instructs sinners in the way. He leads the humble in what is right and teaches the humble his way. All the paths of the Lord are steadfast love and faithfulness to those who keep his covenant and his decrees. For your name's sake, O Lord, pardon my guilt, for it is great. Who are they that fear the Lord? He will teach them the way that they should choose. They will abide in prosperity, and their children shall possess the land. The friendship of the Lord is for those who fear him, and he makes his covenant known to them. My eyes are ever toward the Lord, for he will pluck my feet out of the net. Turn to me and be gracious to me, for I am lonely and afflicted. Relieve the troubles of my heart, and bring me out of my distress. Consider my affliction and my trouble, and forgive all my sins. Consider how many are my foes, and with what violent hatred they hate me. O guard my life and deliver me. Do not let me be put to shame, for I take refuge in you. May integrity and uprightness preserve me, for I wait for you. Redeem Israel, O God, out of all its troubles. Make me to know your ways. Perhaps you heard the language of the paths of the Lord. I know sometimes when I grew up in a context in which there was a lot of praying for the one path that I was supposed to be on, and the one thing that I should do to be happy and fulfilled in life, the one vocation and the one spouse I was supposed to marry, and the one place where I was supposed to live, and et cetera, et cetera. But biblical wisdom talks about not the one path like the yellow brick road, but instead the paths that even if we step off, there is another way that God is still with us. It's really more of language of wisdom, of relationship, of being alongside of God on our paths, and so that is the word from Psalm 25 that I hear this evening, and I think it's appropriate because we have some folks that will share perhaps different paths this evening, different ways that they share their wisdom with their congregations, with the people that they work beside, as chaplains, as ministers in different ways. And so we've done introductions, but I'll reintroduce our three panelists. Panelist sounds very official and fancy. These are three folks that have graciously agreed to share some of their experiences. And again, it's not going to be a these folks have written 5 books about this topic, as much as they've been faithful in their ministry in trying to do this kind of work. They've been through an election cycle or two, and so now they're willing to help share some of their experiences, and then really open the door for conversation for the rest of us too. So again, I'll introduce Rebecca Driscoll, who's the senior pastor at FBC Attleboro, Massachusetts. Also is our vice president, so she'll become our president in a few short months of the national leadership team of ABC USA. Second is Wong Valui, who is the senior pastor at Santa Clara First Baptist Church in California. And then Jim Cummings is coming to us from Nebraska. I don't know actually if you're in Nebraska now. He's graciously joining us from a family trip, but his ministry is in Nebraska. He's a pastor of First Baptist Church in Union, Nebraska, and then part of the health team, the chaplain team at Catholic health initiative, hospice. And so we have a handful of questions that we'll ask these folks, and they can kind of share some of their responses. And then I'd love to just kind of, well, then we'll have a short video, and then I'd love to hear questions or comments or kind of talk back from the rest of the group as well. So panelists, the first question or kind of cluster of questions that I would ask is this. So how often do people in your ministry context, other people, bring up some kind of political conversation or use political language? When do they do this? Where do they do this? And when they do, how do you respond to them? Who would like to share first?
I can go.
Okay, go ahead.
Not a lot in church. I've been pretty well steeped. In fact, I was baptized in high school in a Christian church, which is really strong on we want Christian unity and stay out of politics. And so that's in my being to have that memory. So not much in church, but then outside of church on Facebook memes and such as that, they come up and individuals in that context. And then a lot what I try to do is if there's a divisive antagonistic meme, I try to establish the thought, well, we want to work towards unity, whatever politics we're supporting, and try to bring it back to let's do stuff that is not divisive between people.
Good, thank you. It's helpful.
I can go next. Similarly, my folks at First Baptist in Attleboro don't bring up politics directly. A lot of times it's what they're talking about at coffee hour, or it comes up in prayer requests. And so when it comes up in the prayer requests, if it's something very specific and clearly coming from one side, in my response to that prayer request, I often broaden it out so that it can cover the whole spectrum of theological and political thought, so that it doesn't feel so tension-filled or abrasive. And so I try to recognize that there's folks sitting on multiple sides of this issue, and we pray for everyone as they discern through their perspective, so that, like Jim was saying, there can be a unity that is looked towards and discerned towards, and we ask God to help us guide us to that unity. Something else that has come up recently, a congregant asked me about Christian nationalism, and I was really glad that a UCC church who's about a half mile away from us at First Baptist, and we partner with in the summer, so we worship with this congregation now for 3 summers, and we know them pretty well, is hosting a book discussion around Christian nationalism. And so one of the things I found helpful is to use our community partners in helping to nurture and cultivate these conversations, so that we can have the presence of multiple perspectives and we learn how to engage with each other in respectful ways. So those are some of the things that I've used to navigate this space that can become quite tension-filled at times.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you, Rebecca. Pastor Louis.
This is Wong. So the most direct discussion on politics comes up in our staff meeting, because it's for messaging. So we talk in the staff meeting what is going to be the medium and the method of how we relay the messages, so all of us are in sync. It doesn't mean that all the staff members will agree to one political ideas or opinions, but as a church, we have a uniform message on what we are going to say when people ask. So we talk about that mostly in staff meeting. if there is a conflict or a potential conflict, those are discussed during the staff meeting. Okay, this is how we're going to respond. And then as a senior pastor, after much discussion, I would say, okay, this is going to be the stand of the church, and we will relay these messages. That's the most direct as a staff in the church. Other than that, it will be personal relationship outside the church. It's very, it is rare that we will have political discussion over our coffee hours or lobbies, you know. The only time we had a very, what should I say, charged discussion was on my wife and I. So my wife is also the pastor of this church. We pastor together, and we are immigrant, right? I'm an immigrant. I'm an Asian American. So at one time, it was a direct confrontation from the member that came to us and say, "Tell us who do you vote for?" But that is very rare. They want to know who I vote for and who my wife vote for up on our face. But that's a rare occasion. And we have to tell them, you don't need to know who I vote for, in a very nice way, but in a very stern way, that this is not the place to have that kind of conversation. And at the same time, it is a no. You give a good no to say, no, that is not something you do to people. You can't just go and ask people who you vote for. So that's just a rare occasion. But yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's really helpful to hear all three of you. And I like the connection I make is just kind of the string of unity there is pretty important. Both Rebecca and Jim, you talked about, trying to kind of bring people toward hearing other perspectives, and then Pastor Verlou, you do it in your staff meeting to make sure that there's a unified voice in your staff, and that's helpful to hear that as well. Some of us come from context where we are the staff, and others of us come from context where there's a larger staff where we need to kind of balance different perspectives in that, and how do you maybe disagree in that room so that, once the staff meeting's over, you can have a place of unity outside of the room, right? So you have kind of a unified voice in that. So that's great. Thank you. Okay, so a second question. So the first question was, how often do others bring up some kind of political conversation or language? The second question is, how often do you do it? How often in a sermon or in a ministry context, in a prayer, maybe in a one-on-one conversation, a coffee meeting, or kind of behind the scenes a little bit, or a Bible study, or maybe a handful of folks, or not at all. How often would you all say that you introduce some kind of political topic, or it may not be specifically political, but controversial, or kind of bringing about some level of anxiety in the conversation? How often would you all say you do that?
Well, I can jump into that.
Sure.
And my thought is not that I will specifically bring up the politician or the party, but to bring up the issues, the spiritual concerns that are involved. Last Sunday, my text was John 18:38. Pilate said, "What is truth?" And so to talk about situation of our country where extreme opposites are put forth as being the truth. And how do we deal with this? Was a terrible debate. This was the best debate ever. And and so the thought is to and the anxiety is more on my part to raise up anything is difficult. I don't want to see contention and political divisions from what I've said in a sermon. But also, I think it's a time of great concern, you know, that the last election was not stolen, that to convince half the country it was creates a false division that could be deadly for our government. And so we Baptists have in our memory a very great Baptist preacher, Martin Luther King, who was willing to speak out in ways that could be divisive. And in our history, our whole church is divided north and south over the Civil War. So I hope to be an influence for keeping our country together, but I do it in just little dabs, bringing up topics like that in a sermon.
Yeah, that's helpful. So truth telling matters, right? Speaking truth matters, even, even if it might divide. Like I like the language of dabbles, that maybe instead of too aggressively, it comes in more bite-sized pieces. Thank you, Jim.
Speaking of bite-sized pieces, I don't want to take up too much time just now, but that's another response was to write a poem to encourage that it's not a meme that can say the whole thing in one gulp. In fact, Emily Dickinson said, hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul. And following that whole stanza by stanza, I wrote, truth is the thing you cannot gulp, or it sticks in your craw. It takes two souls to chop and stew, then nibble at this slaw. A sweet refreshment in the fray, so easily ignored. Our close companion on the way, distrusted and abhorred. It's twisted by deceitful hands and sunk beneath the sea. It always to eternity demands the best of me.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Is that something you can copy and stick in the chat so others can see that? And
thank you. I can, I have it. I can try to do that.
Okay.
I hope I don't lose the Zoom while I'm going to
All right.
files.
Thank you. Yeah, I like that. Well versed treatment of truth. Thank you, Jim. Rebecca or Wong.
Yeah, I try not to address politics head on, but I do talk about the politics that were happening in the biblical time. And so talking about the pieces of scripture we read, the things the disciples and Jesus were experiencing during their lifetime was also very politically divisive. And so if we lean into their stories and the lessons and the hope and the love and the mercy and the grace that we can find in their stories, perhaps there can be bits of that we can pull into our story, and we can live out as well. And it's helpful for me, and I hope for my congregation, to realize that we're not alone in these moments, that we have ancestors of faith who have been wrestling with this for centuries. And so we
One second. Can you raise your volume?
Please do.
Yes. Is this better?
Yes.
Yeah. So we are the current generation who has the agency to do something now. And I call folks at the end of sermons, commission them to be the hands and feet of Christ and to bring God's kingdom to earth. I talk about the kingdom of God versus the kingdom of empire. and how we can be ambassadors and co-creators with God to bring about the beloved community. And then I also pray about it, not in a direct way, but I'll pray for international leaders and national leaders and local leaders. I'll pray that we shed our biases and our prejudices, and that we be transformed by the renewing of our minds and our hearts. And I also help us remember, or try to help us remember, that we're interdependent. And so we are all one family in many different ways, and we rely on each other and we need each other, and that divisiveness won't help us move forward in a way that creates abundant life for all.
Great, thank you. Yeah, no, I like that. That you know, if it begins with our political system, that it feels like it's, you know, trying to be on a soapbox. But if it begins with the biblical political system, then, you know, you're preaching a very different message. And so I think there's some wisdom there. That's great. Thank you, Rebecca. Well,
Yeah, so well, I'm speaking only from my context, okay? So your context will be very different. But I can only speak from my context. So the first context is when I was young, I was involved in a little bit of student political movement. So I know what it means to protest, be a part of the political chaos and mess sometimes. And then I read Henry Nouwen. I like him. And he went to South America and he had a reflection on politics. And that greatly influenced me. So this has been my spiritual formation. I am more concerned about, if you're going to be a peacemaker, you have to experience peace within yourself.
mm,
So I focus on what that peace would look like for everybody that is in the church. I preach peace, compassion, and love, acceptance, celebrating diversity, unity, and with the hope that they will live out what they experience in their life. So he talked about this resistance of fear of death. Most of the time we are afraid because, Matt, in our language, there was about centering, right? Centering on prayer. So this is where centering comes. If we center on, let's say, peacemaking, let's say a peacemaker, for they shall be called the children of God. So if I center on that and I balance and stand on Jesus Christ, then it exudes my character. That is what I'm interested in, and that's what I teach. So resistance or fear of death means most of the time we are anxious and afraid because we ourselves are afraid. We ourselves are not at peace. No one talks about he wasn't at peace when he was protesting for peace in South America, and he was very disturbed. Only when he received peace, when he came here and in Canada and working with the disabled organization, that he had peace. So my concern is everyone, every minister or member, we are experiencing peace and compassion. And also my church is a church of all nations. So we are members from like 30 plus countries in the world. So I have to meet the needs of all the people. They are not just Democrat, Republican, Independent. They're from all over. And my focus is for them to be Christ-like, to love like Christ, to live like Christ, to do like Christ, and to act like Christ. So if we continue, I believe, if I continue to preach that, then they would make wise decision and good decision and be a good citizen of this country. That's my focus. So that is the length of what I bring up during election or non-election cycle.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, thank you. And that's a great point, that this is one country. This is the country that we're in, but this is only one country's election cycle. 30 different countries, there may be 30 different sets of, political concerns and political awarenesses, and folks that are also aware of what's happening in Myanmar, and folks that are worried about what's happening in Nigeria, and folks that are worried about, all over. And so that's, I appreciate that point as well, Pastor Louis. Okay, one final question for our panelists. So we've talked a little bit about kind of overt and maybe explicit conversations about politics, but does anybody on the panel have anything kind of in your awareness about when that anxiety kind of leaks out? We all know about systems thinking, and realizing that when there's anxiety in a system, somebody may not come out and say, I'm afraid of the Democrats, or I'm afraid of Trump, or it may not be that explicit, but there may be kind of something that happens. I remember, this is a different church many, many years ago, and it was during an election cycle, and there was a very heated discussion about whether or not the church would allow a dance at a wedding reception. And that anxiety, I think, was fed by not so much about the dance issue as much as all this stuff about, what are we going to do, and what's our country doing, and how are we changing, and are we letting go of our morals, and some of those kind of questions. And so, I mean, maybe some of you all on the panel would have a similar suggestion about what's some of the behind the scenes anxiety that you have seen in the system where you do ministry, and what do you do with that anxiety?
I guess that shows up for me. I'll have some conversation, and actually the well-being of the country comes up in prayer regularly. It's a common thing among the prayer time, even to kind of bring it to a close, praying for peace and unity within our country. And kind of with that spirit, I might talk to an individual and say, and get an agreement that our country is so divided, and the way we're approaching the election, we should do so to increase understanding, so that when the election is over, whoever wins, it should not be a time of now increasing the division that we have, but going through the election could be a time of understanding one another and coming together. And that's nice sounding words, and people have a hard time disagreeing with such things. And so then the next step is, well, great. Why don't you and I talk, and we can just kind of come together and understand, and oh, that's a good idea. But it never happens. And so the anxiety of, can I really sit down with somebody that I disagree with, and we open up, and it's a level of, I don't know, among Christian people, a level of distrust. I'm not going to let down that guard.
Well said. Thank you, Jim. Rebecca or Wong?
So for my context, in Silicon Valley, housing, rent, living condition is like top number one concern of the people. So this is where I'm coming from. So when election comes, or before election comes, economic gain or loss is number one priority in all the mind of our people. Okay, so we worry about, okay, is this going to impact directly to me? So we have a lot of immigrant workers here. We have a lot of tech workers, engineers on H1 green card, and then some are applying for it. And then we have a lot of homelessness in surrounding areas, not where I am. So all these things is in their mind, and they are thinking, will the result of the election cost me economic loss or economic gain? So I am ministering, my wife and I, we minister to the people on their economic anxiety. Will I have food to eat? Will I have a roof over my head? That's one thing. So let me give a very specific example. So my wife and I, we had a board meeting today with our CFO and the board chair because budget time is coming. So in the conversation, our board chair says, in 2 months, we are going to face some uncertainties in the church, and we don't know this will impact our giving. You see how it's related directly, because one way or the other, if they like the result, if they don't like the result, will this impact the giving habits of the people? Although we don't see it impacting, but we are kind of preparing. That's one way. The other one is social anxiety. Will the election cause joy or pain to people? Then how do we bridge that pain and joy? How do we leverage the gospel and Jesus with someone who is suffering pain and who is someone who is having joy? So we are talking not just right now. We have been preparing for a while, right? In our service, in our sermons and our talks. So I think behind the scene is we take care of the economic impact and the social aspects of what the election will bring to us. And it can be an anomaly, but sometimes because of election results, people may leave the church or they may stay in the church, one way or the other. Those kind of thing happens. I have seen this in 3 election cycles. And we are prepared for that. And we don't do battle on Facebook. We just leave it alone. If somebody is so upset and went on the social platform, and if they want to be crazy, let them have fun over there. But I don't do battle on social media platforms. We have invited people, my wife and I, we do counseling for them and to pour in our love and compassion for them wherever they are, wherever they have been, and whatever they are feeling now. Because in the end, we're dealing with people, not political parties. We're dealing with people, and people matter to me. And if I keep my priority that people matter to me, then I'm focused. But if I can't do that, then I'm also in a mess and I can be anxious.
Good words. Thank you, Rebecca.
I've seen a lot of the political anxiety come out in meetings, in committee meetings, in council meetings, in diaconate meetings, and missions and trustees in particular. So yeah, you can feel it. There's like this tension that grows as people are talking about projects that are coming up or budgets or things like this. And so I always start and end meetings with a prayer, and I will often light a candle to remind us all that the light of Christ is with us as we discuss and discern. There have been a few times when I have stopped meetings because people are talking over each other, or it's terse, or their volumes are continuing to elevate. And we can't have a productive conversation. And so I'll stop the meeting and I'll invite everyone to take a few deep breaths and to close their eyes if they feel called and comfortable. and we'll pray, and then we'll start the meeting again. We have a church covenant where we promise relationship to each other and to God. And so we have also written up individual committee covenants, and some of the committees have covenanted with one another to read their specific and unique committee covenant quarterly. So they remind themselves 4 times a year that they're committed in relationship with each other and with God to do this sacred work. And some of the covenants will spell out, we won't talk over each other, we will show up on time, we will, so they're very concrete, tangible ways that we can show kindness and love and respect to one another. And I found that that's really been helpful, really good ways that people can embody the spirit of willingness to participate in conversation with one another, even if they have different views or different opinions, different perspectives, different political ideas about the ways that this country should operate. And one of the other things I've invited folks to do is to show up with a spirit of curiosity. And if there's an idea that they don't agree with, to respond by saying, wow, I didn't know that was so important to you. Can you tell me more about it? Or can you tell me why this is so important to you? Because I can tell this is meaningful for you. And so if we can approach other perspectives with a little bit of curiosity, sometimes it's really helpful for us to understand. We don't have to believe what they believe, but if we understand it, maybe it's easier to coexist with it or to engage with it in a way that's not going to escalate and cause more conflict and more tension.
One more thing, Matt.
Sure.
I want to say that, I am living in California now, which is kind of like a blue state, but I served in Indiana, which is a red state, before I came here. So my wife and I, we were pastors of maybe 95, 94% white, right? And then, so it's a red state. And they're here in blue state in California is very different. So the dynamic is different. But one thing that is constant for us is we are the pastor of the people. It doesn't matter whether you're blue or red or purple or no color. We are there to minister to them, right? I am not in there to make somebody win an election. It's not about that. I'm there to care for their soul. So that has helped us to speak to all people from all parties. And that has been the spiritual formation and discipline that we have listened to, lived out. Because I was in Michigan too. Right now, Michigan is a swing state. I served first in Michigan and then in Indiana. Then I was in Chicago, very different from Michigan and Indiana. So Chicago and California, maybe they are more alike. And then Michigan and Indiana may be more alike, similar. So in all this experience, what I have learned is if you genuinely love people and care for them, then people come to you and they share, they vent their fear or anger, and you just listen and minister to them. That's what I have done. That has been my role.
Good word. And good word to
And
end our
Matthew,
panel on.
if it's fair to jump in, Wong just did. So,
Please, sure.
as he was saying, minister to every person, as Rebecca just said, with respect, just be aware of the Evergreen Baptist Association, which got going with a real passion to reach out to every person and things that were divisive and sexual orientation. And they have a resource. If you go to their website and then click on resources, they have a discussion guide, an acrostic with the word respect. And it speaks of being responsible for your own stuff empathic, sensitive. So that's just a good resource that, and I was not able to figure out how to go to my files and pull them out of there and put them on the chat. So you asked me to do that, but I failed.
Well, and I was looking to see if I could find it on the Evergreen. Maybe I'll look at that here in a moment and see if I could find that too. Yeah, that's a great. You showed that to me earlier in the week. That's a great resource too. And all of you are and great resources. You know, hopefully this is an opportunity for us to kind of get to know each other a little bit better, and maybe somebody here has heard something tonight that they might want to reach out and connect with some of these folks, because I've been of course I expected some wisdom, but I'm pleasantly I'm glad that my expectations were met and surpassed. Thank you all for sharing this evening. I do want to share one more voice, and then we'll have just a couple minutes of folks that might want to share a question or two. This is and here's the shameless plug. Here in about a little bit more than a month, we'll be having our national retreat and biennial meeting for the Ministers Council. And so shamelessly, I just put the registration link on the chat. If you are able to be there, it'd be great to have some of you there, where these kind of conversations can happen around coffee in the morning or dinner or free time or however that goes. But our speaker for that is Kim McNair, and she does a lot of work around some pretty challenging issues and kind of controversial issues. And so I want to play a video of an interview that she had with Lynn Story Bunce, who is one of our leadership team members. And as she shares some of these, maybe this is yet another voice that we can kind of include in the mix of important conversations that we're continuing to have and hear. So let's see if I can get this to work a second time. Can you all see that?
And you have this really beautifully woven ministry of both being in the community, having your feet planted, very grounded in community, while also still having your heart and your hands and your feet in the church and in communities of faith. And so I just wonder, for those who are in more traditional ministry contexts, who are discerning how best to approach difficult social topics in diverse congregations or settings. I know you've put a lot of your experience into words from the pulpit and workshops and in teaching. What have you found to be important tips or tools for approaching difficult sermons or discussions, or bringing communities together around more divisive topics?
You have to know who you are. I am, so part of the way, when you asked me to introduce myself, that is very similar to how I introduce myself in the Undoing Racism workshops. We always open up the workshop and asking people, who are you, what do you do, and why is this important? And for a while, I would write down because I was trying to get it right. And then some of my co-organizers told me, just say who you are. You don't have to write it down, but you really have to know who you are. So I start off by saying, one, I'm a Black woman, and Black with a capital B. That right there tells you, or at least it tells me, who I am in this country, who I am at this time. I am the oldest daughter of George and Terry. So I'm giving you my history and my heritage, my parents. And and sometimes, depending on the workshop or the occasion, I may say, I'm the granddaughter of David Preston McNair, who came from South Carolina and settled in Wyandotte Country in Kansas. So right there, I'm telling you who I am, but you have to figure out for yourself who you are. Oftentimes when people say, so tell me about yourself. Oh, I do this and I do this and I do this. And that's not really the question.
so we won't know what the question is. It's still spinning on my computer. Once it kind of reloads, we'll see if we can get the last. It's only about like 10 seconds left of the video, but alas, you'll have to come to the retreat to figure out what the question is. Any kind of final thoughts from folks who aren't on the panel? Maybe a response or a question for one of the panelists, or just kind of a word here a few moments ago. Pastor Wong talked about centeredness, right? And so thinking about our 3 C's, what does this look like for ourselves and our own centeredness? Our collegiality as ministers. What's this look like for our own competence and how we might learn more about how to do this craft? Any kind of thoughtful closing? Stephanie, what would you share with us?
Well, you just raised the ante and said brilliant or thoughtful or something like that. So I'm not sure if that exactly qualifies, but I did want to comment a bit about being part of ministry in a Black community in a poor neighborhood in one of the poorest cities in the country. And it kind of goes to some of what Wong talked about. I think part of our ministering, at least as I've experienced it, is also that shepherding of our members to understand what's going on in the world around us, because there are some high stakes consequences to this particular election. And so what I've experienced is encouraging us at least to be aware of what's going on, certainly without dictating what anyone does, but it feels like we have a responsibility to make sure that people understand the impact of the presidential election in particular. And then the only other thing I would say is, spiritually, it's a balance between trusting God and knowing when to take action and what action to take. So those were my 2 big thoughts coming out of this discussion.
Good word. Trust and connection together. It's great.
Could I ask? Because absolutely, and that's on my heart very much. But how would you say what are the stakes, and how do we say that without being partisan?
I think that there clearly are efforts to continue to divide and stoke hate on at least one side of this election. I'm in Ohio, remember? So the killing of the pets and the Haitians and all that stuff's going on right here around me. So, and that's real. That's real deal. That's, I could be taken for Haitian walking down the street. And what does that mean for my life and for, some of our constituents' life? So that's one. There are the economic issues. I'm trying to be fair here. Some people can think, well, if we continue in the same trajectory, we'll continue to have the kind of inflation that we've had. And so that too could have a stake. But I think, yeah, so how people's, as Pastor Wong said, how people's lives will actually be touched by what happens here. I do understand economics, and I know that people want to give presidents a lot of credit what happens in the economy, but there are many other factors, and there's a lagging effect. Usually, whatever's going on when the president's sitting there has more to do with what happened 3 or 4 years ago than when they're sitting there. But still, those perceptions and how people react to all that, can have an impact on people's day to day.
Yeah, good words.
I'm so with that. And but if you say, oh, someone said, I'm so anxious about the economy, and wait a minute, just think of the bills that have been passed. Well, now you're supporting the current administration. When you're trying to educate, when you're trying to calm someone's fears, blown out of proportion by falsehoods, but to correct the falsehood is to take sides with the current administration.
Yeah.
And the even if it were true, and it's not, that pets were being stolen and eaten, even then it would not be a reason to stoke unending hatred for people that have come into our country. But
Brown people, let's just call it what it is, brown people.
yeah, yes, and so I want to speak up for that. But if I spoke that in a sermon, it would be clear to the people, well, I'm speaking in favor of the Democrats because it's the Republicans that stoke hatred.
Right. That truth
But
telling.
you said it, the Republicans stoke
and-
hatred. How can I say that without being partisan?
Right. Good.
You talk about Jesus. You talk about the Syrophoenician woman and how she called out Jesus's own racism and how her words transformed.
I'm sorry, she called it what?
She called out Jesus's own racism and transformed his heart. And then he widened the circle. He realized that his ministry was not just to the Jews, but also to the Gentiles and to everyone. And because she spoke up and he listened to her, took the time to listen to her, he widened the circle so that everyone could know God's love. And so that's the sermon I preached 2 weeks ago, because that was the lectionary text 2 weeks ago. So that's one way to do it. There are many ways to do it, but that's one way.
Well, yeah, basing it in the text is an important start, right? For sure. Yeah. Good. Other questions or thoughts? We're already over a little bit. Our goal in my video is still spinning, so unfortunately we're not going to get to watch the rest of that. But any other kind of final thoughts before Rebecca closes us with the prayer? I want to say thank you. Thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for your work. I don't know everything about each of your ministry contexts, but I know they exist in some anxious places and some anxious times. And so the ways that you point people to Jesus and the ways that you comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable is important. And so thanks for being a part of the conversation tonight to help us think about how we might do that and how we might share one another's burdens in that work. So I appreciate your all's time this evening. Rebecca, would you share with us our closing prayer?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Valerie, for hosting us tonight. It was wonderful to be with everyone. Thank you for coming and sharing this space with us. I have a sermon. Oh, not a sermon. It's 7 prayers, so maybe almost a sermon. But it was written by the Reverend Mindy Welton Mitchell, who is the executive regional minister of Wisconsin. And she wrote it with the Wisconsin Council of Churches. So she says this: 7 prayers with 7 scriptures. You can pray one each day of the week when you read the morning news or social media, at your lunch break, or at the end of a troubling day, or you can pray the prayer you need in the moment. On your way to the polls, conventions, or demonstrations. When our anger leads us to roads of rage, Spirit of wisdom, guide us to take hopeful action. Depart from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. Psalm 34, verse 14. When the news is disturbing, when hopelessness troubles us, gentle God, may we know your presence is with us. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid. John 14, verse 27. When social media posts or politics threaten friendships, when politics and systems of the world threaten to divide us, Prince of Peace, reign in us. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in the one body, and be thankful. Colossians chapter 3, verse 15. As political signs are posted, when we see our neighborhoods covered with blue and red signs, Creator God, remind us you created every one of us all our neighbors in your image. If it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Romans 12, verse 18. When we feel defeated or don't want to engage with others, when our despair causes us to withdraw, O Lord, remind us that we belong together. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Matthew 5, verse 9. When your mental health is affected, when our anxiety keeps us up at night, God, who watches over us, grant us restful sleep. I will both lie down and sleep in peace, for you alone, O Lord, make me lie down in safety. Psalm 4, verse 8. And when fear of what might happen overwhelms us, when hope seems but a glimmer, Eternal One, remind us that seeds take time to be planted, and a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace for those who make peace. James 3, verse 18. This is called Loving Your Neighbors in Election Season, and it was the Wisconsin Council of Churches, written by Reverend Mindy Weldon Mitchell. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Jim. And thank you, Wong, for your wisdom. And thank you all for participating this evening. I appreciate you and the ministry you do. Blessings.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all. All right.
Thanks, Jim, for the extra work trying to figure out the computer. That worked great. As soon as you changed computers, it was perfect.
Thanks for your patience.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Of course.
You have those materials. If any would seem helpful, you've got the list of people.
Great. Yeah. Yeah.